Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my overview of Kingdom Come Deliverance. Yes, a little bit out of season, but actually probably a bit more in season than you may realise. If for some reason you're not across it, while this came out in 2018, the sequel is just around the corner in the next month or two. Couple that with the fact that this is going on ultra deep sale on Steam, at least for the next week at the time of this recording. It's probably never been a better time to dip back in or check it out. So when I do overviews on this channel, it's just where I have a look at the first 2 hours of the game. I have a spiel about it usually. Bit different here. While I have just gone back, I've started a fresh save. I'm 2 hours in. I had to put the controller down to make this video because I just want to keep playing. It is that good, but still a little bit unusual, a little bit different. Back when it released, I put a lot of hours in. While I never clocked the game, perhaps this time around I will. So that's kind of the setup. Does it hold up? Unbelievably so. It's still worth whatever the full asking price is, without a doubt. I still really like the world design, the sort of artistic direction, while it still has a kind of, I don't know what you would want to call it. There is a AA indie, a bit of a jank to it. However, it's the most polished end of that space, as you could hope for. And the attention to detail and things like all the armor and clothes and the world building in general is just wonderful. But there's something that I like about it, and how do I delicately put this across? There is a kind of ugliness in a way to the natural beauty that is on full display. So it's not some sort of Hollywood, perfect pine forests or picturesque skyboxes or anything like that. It is very much set in that sort of Euro medieval setting where you're traveling through, hamlets with mucky, crappy roads that are all torn up from the foot traffic and that, but even just the crummy little sort of naturally looking creeks that you'll come across. There is kind of an understated nature to what makes it kind of more realistic in that natural beauty. And this is something I've thought ever since I first played it, and it still jumps out the screen at me. It is picturesque in a much more, like I said, understated and natural way, as opposed to what you're probably oversaturated with, which is, Hollywood kind of set pieces. However, when you compare that against when the game goes a little bit more set piece, more built up structures, that sort of thing, or specifically things without even spoiling, but in the early start that I've already started replaying, giant army hosts rolling up on a little village, it really sort of stands out against this, very small scale little hamlet in its own simple, pretty kind of way, being up against this gigantic war host. It's a pretty fearsome thing to see. So yeah, there's a beauty to it, and then you mix in the fact that all the little attention to detail bits and pieces of like armor and weaponry, and it's really quite wonderful and clearly like a labor of love. As far as like the structure of this game, it is very much like a sort of RPG, narrative heavy and with a lot of simulation to it kind of game. You very much are shaped by the idea that you play as little old Henry, this blacksmith's son of absolutely no note, kind of being wrapped up in the periphery of a retelling of ongoing troubles of 15th century Bohemia. Which was interesting because, before this game came along, that whole space was a black spot for me. But you have King Wenceslas, who is a kind of lax and slacking king in the shadow of his father before him, was it Charles, like the Sixth or something? I don't know. I know bits and pieces, but I'm not exactly a student of history in this space. But his dad casts a very large shadow and did great things for Bohemia in general. His son has sort of garnered a lot of ill will from a lot of different power blocks because he's kind of just a bit of a party animal that lives, let's say, a bit too much like a free spirit. And through that, I believe it's Wenceslas's half-brother, Sigismund, is essentially enlisted from Luxembourg to take control of the situation. And his way of doing that is marching an entire army through the land. Anyway, look, a historian could tell you this much better, but it's this very strange pseudo-state of war with people drawing lines, and it's not as classically clear-cut as you might kind of assume at first. It makes for a very rich story, and so you're just this dude tottering along trying to make his way. There is this main story for you to follow, but it kind of goes open world, very hardcore combat, very much trying to get ahead is tricky. You are a blacksmith's son, your ability to kill people in combat is very low. You have to get experience and work your way into it. I believe you can't even read and write, that sort of thing. That's a skill that you can develop along the way. It's really cool. It's very much a small fish in a big pond, and I really do feel like that's a core of what made this game so successful when it came out, is because it kind of treats the gamers with a sort of respect. You know, hey, this game's tough. Hey, you're not the hero, but you can earn your way. You know, make it a bit more tangible. Anyway, for my part, from the early days in, it is so wonderful to come back to this. The soundtrack is excellent and a modern classic with the theme, and it'll get the emotions going. I know that as the hours go on. Very early on, it lays out the framing of the storytelling to be incredibly masculine heavy. I've talked about this before. It's something that you're not allowed to talk about, but I really do think that in game design, and specifically narrative design, there are masculine stories and there are feminine stories, and a lot of this comes from different motivations depending on where you sit in relation to those spheres. To frame this, you have Henry's dad, the blacksmith, and that dude steals the show in the opening hours. So well written and so well cast, he kind of almost overshadows a lot of the game. But it's so important that they got it right, and that they did. So Henry's kind of a free spirit, piss-farting around with the boys, getting in trouble with the local law. He wants to travel. He's his typical teenager. He's restless and he's trying to figure it out for himself. And his dad is a great, firm, dad of the year kind of hand, trying to keep him steady with some really good nuggets of advice to open the game out anyway. But you can tie that into all the sort of peripheral or main characters, however you want to see it, being that you're more of a peripheral character to their story, the lords and ladies of the land as you work your way alongside. I don't even want to give away what narrative there is revealed in the first few hours, but the point is that it's incredibly well written, it's very, very strong, and it doesn't hurt that it's built against the backdrop of, an actual history that exists that you can investigate if you're more interested in. But the combat is so unique and interesting, a bit clunky, right? And I believe they're going to iron out a lot of that stuff in the second game. I will say, again, I've intentionally stuck to my overview format playing through these 2 hours. It is very cutscene heavy, let's say, and to me it's a delight, right? I am generally quite critical of, games that are trying to be Hollywood or like movies and that, and that's because a lot of them drop the ball when it comes to gameplay engagement. They make that very secondary in their pursuit to imitate movies. But when the game actually gets it right, respects you as a player, gives you some interesting stuff to do, and nails the substance of the story, well, it becomes much more forgivable. It's just a shame that that's the exception to the rule. So yes, this is very heavy on sort of cutscenes. I wouldn't necessarily say that it moves slowly. I think it builds up very well, and we're off to the races already 2 hours in. You got a bit of an idea of where the game's going. You're very set up. But if you are just full stop sensitive to putting the control down for 5 minutes at a time to watch a whole thing play out, wonderful as it is still a buyer beware of that. This game has that in there. But I find, at least for me, for whatever reason, it's much more palatable. Anyway, look, I don't really need to go on more than that. The game still holds up excellently. I highly recommend it. Look for a follow-up video as I put more and more time into it and approach review. Because as I said, to put a bow on it, and I think I might do like a thoughts video following up this, but I am a bit frustrated with gaming. I am overwhelmed. I find that my backlog is more oppressive than actually a viable option to play through. So leave it with me. Maybe this turns out to be a pretty cool experiment, but for the moment, I've got tunnel vision for this game. And dare I say, I'm kind of excited to put more time into it. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.